Timour Azhari is the Iraq bureau chief for the Reuters news agency. It's a big patch from Beirut to Baghdad. He's currently in Beirut in Lebanon, where reports tell us more than 550 people have been killed in Israeli strikes since Monday. Can you give us an idea, Timour, of what that means on the ground as opposed to simple statistics in headlines?
Thanks for having me on, James. I mean, what this means basically is that people are terrified and they don't know what's going to happen next. This is completely unprecedented. We haven't seen numbers like this since the Lebanese civil war, when you had massacres happening. Hezbollah and Israel fought a 2006 war. It lasted 34 days. Over the 34 days, 1,200 people were killed. And in one day yesterday, we have basically half of that. So the numbers are staggering. And then when you speak to people, there was a mass exodus from the south of the country, which borders Israel. Tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people leaving overnight, some of them sleeping in the streets, spending hours and hours on a road that usually would take about an hour to get from the south to Beirut. And now there's people living in shelters, which are, schools, not bomb shelters, because Lebanon doesn't have bomb shelters like Israel does. These are schools that are repurposed for people to live in. Lebanon already was in a crisis. You might remember that massive port explosion we had in 2020. There was a financial crisis the year before that. Things have been getting worse and worse. And here's another blow.
I often feel that it's a slightly luxurious perspective to sit in London and ask questions like the one I'm about to ask you. But what is the received opinion or your personal opinion on what Netanyahu's purpose and or end game is here?
The Israelis have been quite clear that what they want to do is change the situation in the north, as they call it. The day after the Hamas attack on October 7th, Hezbollah joined the fight, started firing at Israel. Israel started firing back.
That's
Since
important.
then,
That's important context, isn't it? Because it is war in a sense, two-directional war.
It has displaced tens of thousands of Israelis. It's displaced around 100,000 Lebanese. And what the Israelis say is that they need to change the situation so those people can return. Now, we do have to remember that Israel has the most right-wing government in its history, with people in key positions who were formerly labeled terrorists by the Israelis.
Yes.
So Hezbollah has picked a fight with a government that really has no love lost with this group, and that goes both ways. So yes, the Israeli intentions are of course viewed with skepticism here. That they're seen sort of as in a way personally tied to Netanyahu's situation, but also tied to the wider context of this, which is that the Israelis want to return these people to the north. The question is whether this achieves that. I mean, what we've seen is that ever since this escalation that's now a week in the making between Israel and Hezbollah, Hezbollah has fired rockets deeper into Israel. Leading hundreds of thousands of people, according to Israeli tallies, to sleep in bomb shelters. So it's clear that that's not working so far. And there's a lot of skepticism around the world, really, from world leaders about whether this kind of a move will return people to the north. Israel occupied southern Lebanon for 20 years, from the 80s until around 2000. And the idea there was to have this buffer zone that protects Israel. 20 years later, they withdrew. It didn't work. So there's a question now of basically how you deal with this issue. Hezbollah is there. They are present in villages and towns, and it's going to be very hard to get them out.
For people listening in the UK who don't have a deep knowledge of the region or indeed the history, what is the likelihood of this developing into a sort of form of attrition comparable to what we've seen in Gaza? Hezbollah remains a more viable fighting force than Hamas, I think.
Definitely. I mean, everything we know about Hezbollah is that they're much more professional, much more well-equipped, heavily armed than Hamas, and a war between these two parties will be much more serious, much more violent. Hezbollah have said, they said a few days ago that, their leader said that they are willing to continue this fight no matter the consequences. They have said that this is a support front for Gaza. They have linked themselves to that front. And they say they will continue, again, no matter the consequences. We have to remember in the 2006 war, which started when Hezbollah kidnapped Israeli soldiers, it was very destructive. And at the end of it, the leader of Hezbollah came out and said that if he had known the destruction, he wouldn't have done it.
Right.
This time he's saying, I'm going to do it no matter the consequences. And we've seen in the past couple of days that, well, the impact, the consequences have been extremely high. And we're just at the beginning of this, it seems. As we speak right now, the Israeli military says it's striking more targets and it's going to expand these operations.
To be clear, that I mean, you see literally as we speak right now.
Yeah.
I just out of interest, Timour, does Reuters report this as an attack upon Hezbollah or as an attack upon Lebanon?
Reuters is a news agency that reports what people say,
Yes.
and we give the context, right? So Israel says it is striking Hezbollah targets. The Lebanese health ministry says 50 children and more than 90 women have been killed in this out of 558 people killed. So you're talking about 10% kids, 20% women. We put those facts in front of our viewers and we let them determine, how they see it. So that's the situation here. Israel says it's striking Hezbollah. The Israelis did say, in messages before the strikes began that Lebanese living around Hezbollah, munitions should leave. But, to be honest, it was seen with a bit of ridicule in Lebanon because you're not really going to know if there's a rocket placed under your house or near your house, right? I mean, it's not like there's a map of these things.
No.
So, in fact, what you've actually seen is just a mass exodus from the south. People are terrified. This fighting has been going on for months, almost a year now. This is the first time we've seen this kind of movement, right? We're really at mass displacement right now.
And finally, why now? Why this escalation now? Given, as you say, that the missiles have been exchanged since October the 7th.
It's been simmering for a long time. There was an incident in July, which the Israelis blamed on Hezbollah, where a rocket killed 12 kids
on the
in
football
the Israeli
pitch.
occupied.
On the football pitch.
Exactly.
Yes.
And since then, we've really been in this escalation. It's been steadily escalating. The Israelis killed a senior Hezbollah commander. Then we had those pager explosions last week. It was only a week ago. It feels like months. The walkie-talkies the next day. More bombardment, them hitting a tower in the southern suburbs, again, killing Hezbollah commanders, but also many civilians. And we've just been going from there. I do have to note here that, the situation in Lebanon is very different than 2006, in the sense that Lebanon had a lot of friends in 2006. It had Gulf partners. It had, the French. It had a lot of goodwill. We're in a very different place today. Few statesmen recognized internationally. Hezbollah seen as having taken over a lot of the Lebanese state. And, a lot of people, to be frank, don't mind seeing Hezbollah take a beating. And so there's a question here about where we go. How much willingness, how much interest is there from the international community who have failed to stop Gaza for a year to stop Lebanon as well?
Wow. And what a point to end our conversation, which I think, to speak to your final point, will not be the last time we speak. Timour Azhari, the Iraq bureau chief there for Reuters.